Thanks, Jack. Hopefully you got that on the screen now. A bit of a thumbs up would be good.
Yeah, we're good. Thanks,
Thank
mate.
you. Dave Roberts is my name. I'm the District Manager for the Otway District with Forrest Fire Management Victoria. And I'm going to change gears a little bit and probably intellect to a degree from the previous few speakers that we've heard. But I guess I wanted to just put a bit of a case study on the table around how land managers, which I am, how we have to take in all the various data and input to then be able to inform the decision making we make around how we actually manage landscapes and manage the various conflicts or various balancing opportunities that we need to consider. We're looking at how we balance biodiversity values and something like mountain bike development, which is something that's very prevalent throughout the Otway's landscape. I'm fortunate, like a lot of people on this call, to work and play amongst some amazing landscapes within the Otway's region. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of our lands, Wadawurrung, Woolajin, Gadabanud and Karewarung. And our district footprint covers, not only some of the most amazing coastal stretches of Victoria, but we've got some amazing rainforest areas, grassy plains, foothill forests. So we really have got some of the most amazing diverse natural environments to work and play in. So we're really fortunate. And we have a strengthening relationship with both Eastern Mar and Wadawurrung across our land management portfolio. And we're really proud of the partnerships we're growing with both corporations to help us and help them manage country together. So it's exciting times. So my talk today is really looking at mountain biking, how a different pressure on the landscape other than fire or planned burning might impact the type of decisions we make, understanding the risks that we're trying to identify, and then also some of the mitigations that we put in place in pretty standard formats across our sort of planning of projects. So Forrest mountain bikes, I'm not sure how many people here crack open their cupboard, grab the like. Mountain biking has been a boom sport for the last 20 years across, certainly across Australia and particularly across Victoria. And Forrest mountain bikes was developed when the Otway National Park and Otway's Forest Park was created back in the mid-2000s as the hardwood forestry industry was transitioning out, and local townships and local areas really needed to shift the focus of what they were doing from an economic sense. So tourism was something that was really seen as a driver for local economies within our region. And it's been a really, really important recreational pursuit and recreational development for that community over that time. And there was two real strongholds for mountain biking within the Forest footprint. One was the township itself and the Southern Trail Network at Forest. And then the other network was the Yaugher block, the Yaugher Trail Network. And those two areas we'll talk about today in terms of the difference between the two and how the future development of trail networks across this footprint needs to consider different variables and different things as we make decisions around trail placement, different types of inputs and risks that we need to manage, and making sure that the key thing that people are coming for, which is the natural environment and recreate and get involved in out in nature, that we're not compromising those values for the sake of the recreational pursuit. As I said, the trails were really initiated in around 2005, and over the last period of time across Victoria and across actually southeastern Australia, mountain biking as a pursuit has gone global. It's gone really big, really significant increase in participation across that recreation area. And the trails are becoming more diverse. It's a very competitive industry in terms of attracting government funding for both development and maintenance. It's very, very competitive industry for getting recreational people in the door and actually into your community to utilise the facilities. So over the last period of time, there's been a strong desire, particularly with the forest trail networks, to look at how they're stacking up against, I guess, other benchmark trails across the country, and make sure that the trails that we have out on site are actually meeting the recreational user group's needs, but also that they're at a standard that are going to also continue to attract the recreational user to the area, because there's no point having these trails and spending the time maintaining and managing them if they're not being used. So there's been a lot of strategic planning done across that. It's not been a one organisational focus. It's been a strong partnership between both DELP and the local government body, Otway Shire, to really see how we can position the trail network to be the best they can be, and taking advantage of all the key landscape features that we have across the area. One of the key recommendations that we've had through recent audits of the trails has been the maintenance of the trails has been undercooked. This is causing a bit of erosion, a fair bit of issues in terms of compaction, widening of trails. And there's also been an identification that the trails that we actually currently have at the moment, there's a portion of them not being actively used. And there's in other areas that there's opportunities for further growth and further development of different types of trails. So all this was put into a mixing pot last year, and master plan developed, future plan put forward to government for a bit of an analysis and a bit of a investment opportunity. And between state government and local government, there was a commitment put forward of about $2 million to actually do some really detailed planning and understand where we can put these trails, where we can align them, make sure we're getting the best we can, but also managing all the various planning inputs we have to, whether that's environmental, cultural heritage, native title, catchment. I think there's 16 different legislations that us as land managers have to work our way through to be able to do any sort of development on the Crown land these days. And that's appropriate. That's no different to a private land developer. We don't have a set of rules that we have to, that we're excluded from doing. We're obliged to follow the same sort of planning and development frameworks as everyone else. In terms of a funding sense, we were fortunate to get that $2 million. The $2 million was to develop the forest trailheads, which is the ones in and around the southern end of the township itself. But we also, with the funding, had the opportunity to plan out, do a thorough planning exercise of the entire network, but not just the forest and detailed planning of the forest network, but also the northern network, the Yaugher network, where there's some really unique areas of interest through there. So I'm going to drill in now to some of the specific ecological considerations that we put in place for this project. And hopefully this isn't anything new to anyone. I just thought it'd be worth stepping you through the thought processes. I'm going to park to one side parallel processes that were happening here around geotechnical studies, cultural heritage surveys with Eastern Maar, European heritage surveys, and a whole range of other things. I'm going to park them to one side, but they were running parallel to this process. But given our threatened species interest, we'll zero in quickly on this. So the entire project area went through a ecological assessment, which not only involved, I guess, desktop analysis, but involved quite a lot of field work and walking of trails and walking of areas where the proposed trails were being considered. That report came out with some fantastic information for both the northern and southern trail networks. And as you can see there, no surprises in terms of the number of species and the type of values from a flora point of view. And from a fauna point of view, you can see there we had a number of species picked up through the data sets that were available. A couple of things we did learn through this first phase of the ecological assessments was two things. One, how there's such a small percentage of our landscape that's actually been thoroughly surveyed across a whole range of species that we need to be really clear on some of the data bias that comes into some of our decision making, or the absence of data into our decision making. The other thing was how important local knowledge is and local data sets are to inform some of these studies as well. And we had a couple of really important local residents who were also incredibly skilled naturalists, and they were able to provide us with some fantastic insights into areas, particularly within the Yaugher part of the landscape, where the corporate data set may not have picked up on certain things, but their local intel, observations, knowledge was able to fill a few gaps and enabled us to expand our research and our knowledge into a different area. So as a result of that local knowledge, I guess we took a deeper dive into the Yaugher block, acknowledging that the two areas, the forest end and the Yaugher end, are quite different ecologically and a different forest type. The Yaugher end is really heathy forest, heathy dry forest with areas of treeless heath, whereas the Yaugher, the forest block, is more taller forest and deeper gully systems that are probably a bit more topography in amongst it. We commissioned a couple of gun operators, as I look at my screen and see both Mark and Barb in the agenda and on the screen. And really, there was a couple of questions we wanted to explore further that came out of the original report. One was, what were some of the key threatening processes that we needed to consider if we were going to be doing trail alignments, particularly through the Yaugher area? And the second one was, what are some of the key knowledge gaps and species gaps that aren't necessarily being picked up in some of the corporate data sets? So Mark and his team were commissioned to come in and give us, I guess, some of that more detailed information. Lots of trapping, lots of cameras, lots of field work, probably the odd leech. That's almost a given when you're working out in the Otways. And Mark was able to really provide us, and Mark and Barbara really provide us with a fantastic, really zeroed in approach to our two areas of interest, and enable us as land managers to start to really inform what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and where we were going to do it. Some of the summaries at a higher level really showed that in terms of Phytophthora, which is a really major consideration for us when we're talking about heathland communities in particular, is the Northern Trail Network at Yaugher. There's some real important considerations we need to be putting in place around trail alignments, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But the southern block, the forest block, there's probably less threats in that area from a cinnamon fungus point of view, namely due to the forest type and the soil types and the topography. So we're able to start making some decisions more zeroed into the landscapes and the two units, and allow ourselves a bit more thinking time with some more data and more informed decisions. Cinnamon fungus isn't new to this site, particularly Yaugher. There in 2006, there was some work done to identify, when the trails were originally conducted, understanding the spread and movement of cinnamon fungus through the Yaugher area. So the key for us is understanding where it is, how that intersects with, I guess, any current and planned trail development, and also whether or not we need to be looking at completely modifying our plans in response to, I guess, the presence of cinnamon fungus and healthy heathy environments. So Mark and Barb and the team were able to find not just some of the key indicator species around potoroos and bandicoots, but a whole broad range of species, which is fantastic for us in an area which is actually outside our Otway arc baiting program in terms of fox control, and it's almost a little bit of an island out on its own, the Yaugher block. Interesting one there was the Rufous bristleberg, which Barb was just listening over the balcony of earlier at her place. So that's quite an inland population for our understanding. So it just shows you there's some rich stuff going on, and all these species are currently coexisting with a certain amount of people interactions with trails already in the landscape, but we don't want to be compromising these species and these habitats if we can manage that. So second last slide, to cut to the chase with some of the findings. Our strong sort of information flow for us was that we could focus our efforts pretty confidently on the Southern Trail Network and start really getting into the detailed design of the trail network down there and get moving with a proposal in the Southern Trail Network. But when it comes to this Yaugher block, we actually need to have a bit more of a considered approach, particularly around cinnamon fungus and the knock-on effects to spreading the disease through vulnerable communities that then have other knock-on effects around the species that use those communities, particularly small mammal species. Mark and the team were able to really graphically show for us areas within this area where trail development could be managed and could be appropriately managed with some good trail alignment, some good trail design, and also some really strong principles around best practice cinnamon fungus management. So that's that blue area there in the central and western side of the Yaugher block. The eastern side, where there's some really high quality heathy woodlands, really dominated by the austral grass tree and a lot of the flowering heath species. We originally had some trails proposed through these areas, but with the information that Mark and Barb were able to provide us with this in-depth look and the ability for us to change alignments really easily at this stage of the planning process, we've decided that there's areas here where we actually don't want to be introducing any new trails because that increases the risk of cinnamon fungus to these areas. So we'll be looking at a redesign of trail networks, rehabilitating other trails, and really responding to, I guess, the ecological inputs for this area on the east. And that's been really important knowledge for us because we're not far enough down the trail now where we're locked and loaded with all our plans. We have the ability, because we've done this extra bit of work, to be able to inform the design and get a measured response to how we can mitigate the spread of cinnamon fungus and protect the environment in which ultimately people are coming to enjoy. We think that this type of approach is going to become quite standard for us in terms of a threat management plan per project that we sort of develop. It hasn't always been the way. We used to just punch trails in all over the place, or adopt and form up the informal trails that maybe volunteers have put in ad hoc. So these sort of approaches are way better for us to be able to make some informed decisions and really make some good balanced choices around how we actually have people interacting with our environments. From here on, we're looking at different ways in which we can partner with different organisations to continue to improve our management of cinnamon fungus. I know Mark and Barb will be talking about this later on, but information knowledge is key with this stuff, and informing and educating people around the cinnamon fungus itself is key for us. We're looking at ways in which good design can influence improvements. Hygiene works, particularly around our contractors, and use of contractors and movement of soil is key, and getting that done up front, not as a secondary process. And finally, I guess the big thing for us is, and it's a continuous improvement cycle, is really doing the thorough planning up front rather than retrospectively, to be able to make good decisions at the time that we need to make them. And our lessons through this process has been that you need to take the time, you need to listen to the advice, and then you need to respond accordingly. Otherwise you actually can't compromise the fundamentals that you're trying to actually achieve through these processes up front. So Mark, thank you for your field work to date, and Barb. And Jack, I might hand back to you, and you can see whether or not there's any other questions or queries.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate that. That's a really interesting project. So there are a couple of questions there for you, mate. One from Upper Barwon Land Cares. There are some weed challenges such as holly infestations in the area. Are there any plans to build on weed control projects that are already happening?
That's a great question. We've been steadily, I won't say expansively, but steadily growing our weed control programs, particularly in the Forrest Park, particularly in the riparian areas. Blackberry and willow in particular along the riparian zones have been real focuses for us recently. But we would be loving the opportunity to, I guess, partner up with various land care groups to see how we can complement each other's works and make sure that we're being the most efficient and effective we can with our weed control, because that's got to be obviously a sustained program, not just a one-off.
Great, thanks, mate. There's another question here on whether or not you've designed any interesting bike cleaning stations for PC, or whether that's on the cards.
It is on the cards, absolutely. And we were given some reasonable examples of some from different parts of the network. They're using some pretty interesting ones down at Derby in Tasmania in their mountain bike development down there, where we've got the designs for those. And we've also done a bit of work with the Grampians team for the Grampians Peaks Trail, where they're currently developing a walking track there. Got some designs for the washdown stations that they're building at the moment. We'll try and pick the best elements out of those designs and put something in place. But having the infrastructure there is one thing. Then the next challenge is to get people to use it. And that's where that education thing really comes to the fore in terms of imposing those key messages on the people who come and use the sites.
Great, thanks, mate.